Hey Rachel, just start. Go. Yeah. Cut these people off.
Hello, everyone. You might still be in here for snacks. You might be in here for the transportation panel. Either way, we're happy that you're here. We're going to go ahead and get started with our transportation panel today. And we're excited that you all are sticking around with us. We had a great chat this morning for water and sewer. We'll keep up the energy for transportation. So today, well, my name is Rachel Knobloch. I'll be the moderator today. We'll have some folks running around with microphones. Raise your hand if you have a microphone. Thank you, Harrison. We are recording today's session, so that will ensure that you all can listen and hear all the questions from home. For our panel today, it's focused on transportation infrastructure as an engine for economic growth. And what we discussed as a group before coming down here to Gillette was that transportation infrastructure is one of the few investments that touches nearly every part of the economy, everywhere, but also here in Wyoming. It impacts, as we all know, safety, workforce access, tourism, supply chains, economic growth. And so our goal really for this session is to have a conversation with you all about what's working well. What are the opportunities here for our transportation infrastructure? What are some of the challenges that you all are facing when it comes to transportation? And what are some strategies that you all might recommend for investing in our transportation infrastructure, for maintaining our transportation infrastructure? And I did want to start out, I'm going a little off script a little. I looked at our transportation technical assistance cases for our Wyoming Grant Assistance Program this morning, and we have received 42 technical assistance requests for communities who could use a little bit of assistance with transportation. We have some requests for expanding transportation services in Wyoming's communities for grant writing, Safe Streets and Roads for All, build grants. Folks want to work on their roads, their airports, their bridges, a lot of safety improvement projects, sidewalks, lighting, and of course, recreation pathways. So that will be our, maybe part of our foundation for this discussion. But before we jump into it, I did want to invite you all to introduce yourselves, our fantastic panelists for our transportation panel today.
Hello, I'm Kevin Hibbard. I'm the State Budget Director, Grants Management Office Director. I'm also the co-chairman of the CRAG, that's the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group. My prior life, I worked at WADOT as a financial officer for 20 years, so I have a little bit of an understanding of how the system works, and that includes what the needs of the local governments in the state and the role the federal government plays.
My name is Carson James. I work at the Wyoming Department of Transportation in the Highway Safety Program, managing the behavioral safety grants and the motorcycle safety program.
My name is Brandy Miller. I work with the Local Government Coordination Office in the Department of Transportation as well. My position, I am the Local Government Coordination Office Supervisor, and I have two programs that I work with. We help fund the local program side and the transit side. So we do public transportation funded by the FTA, and we do the local program side. We have two programs. We fund things like the Transportation Alternatives Program as well as the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality.
Hi everyone, I'm Casey Brown. I'm WYDOT's grant writer, and I also do a lot of their policy work on the federal government side. So right now, really heavy into reauthorization as IIJA expires, working on advocating for Wyoming to have a rural-friendly reauthorization that hopefully can help fund some much-needed transportation improvements.
Good morning, my name is Jacob Bustos. I am Casey's counterpart, and I am the legislative liaison for the department. Hello, everybody. My name is Bob Eatman, and I'm currently a consultant with the Grants Management Office doing regional training, but I spent 24 years with Federal Highway Administration. I worked with Director Hibbard when he was at YDOT as a Fed, and he was at the state. We worked really well together. And that's kind of my background, and I'm up here to help answer any questions from the federal perspective, but then I'm also here to provide technical assistance to communities through the Grants Management Office on transportation-related types of projects.
And last but not least, I'm Amanda Rogers, and I'm with the U.S. Department of Transportation in the Office of the Secretary, supporting the Routes Initiative, which is the Rural Opportunities to Use Transportation for Economic Success. That's a really long way of saying that we are DOT's Rural Policy Office. So we work throughout the country supporting rural communities, connecting them to funding, providing resources. So in particular, I work a lot with our outreach and newsletters, which some of you might be subscribed to, as well as working on a new disaster preparedness toolkit that the Routes team is working on as well.
Well, that is all very exciting. Well, maybe I'll start thinking back to all the technical assistance request cases that we have received and all of the work that you do in all of those areas that touch those technical assistance requests. As the state and its communities continue to work to improve transportation infrastructure and systems, how can they strike the right balance, getting people where they need to go, in and out and around Wyoming, with the funding that is available for transportation? We know it's changing, but what can folks do today?
So as I mentioned, I do transit and I do transportation alternatives and congestion mitigation. One thing that we are finding right now, obviously there is a challenge with funding. It's been very clear lately with transportation. One of the biggest things that I would highly encourage communities to do is to collaborate with each other. In the transportation world, there's a piece of that I think Wyoming needs to come to the front and kind of start regionalizing, look at how we can collaborate with our partners in our counties to see how we can actually utilize the funds and process the transportation more efficiently. So I would encourage one of the counties that we work with is, it's actually WRTA out of Fremont County. Tim is one of the people in the state that is really kind of trying to frontier this regionalization thing. I don't know if regionalization is the answer, but he has definitely made huge strides in working efficiently in the transportation world or the public transit world. So I would say possibly look at collaboration.
If I can just quickly add to that, from the federal side, I would say a lot of successful grant applications, especially from small rural communities, have that regional approach. Because when we look at grant applications, we look at your, merit review and what the narrative and what you said, but there's also components for environmental review. Can you actually do the project, financial completeness, and you have to satisfy those. And being able to say that you have partners that maybe have done federal grants before can really help boost that. From maybe, maybe you aren't sure because you've never done a federal grant to, oh wait, but you have a partner that did. And so you can help collaborate and then we can be more sure of your grant application.
So the picture on the state side, there's good news. Good news is that YDOT secured sales tax portion on the vehicles that you pay. And that's going to be $140 million a biennium. That's good news. Bad news is our condition assessment is deteriorating. So we have to focus on that, and we have to work with our federal partners, and reauthorization is coming that was spoken of before. I went through that several times, and that is a very complicated task to make sure that Wyoming positions itself with federal funds. And remember, a lot of roads in Wyoming, the interstates, the national highway system, those are connectivity routes. The federal government has a responsibility to help facilitate that. But as the money trickles down for those interstates and national highway system, there becomes a scarcity of funds. So we have to focus on that through all the end users, the transit, the airports, all of that, and hopefully we come out of the reauthorization in a better place than we are today.
Just to build on that, definitely talk to your legislators, both at the state end and at the federal end. Reauthorization is a really good time now to start making that case because sufficient funding floats all boats. And we really serve as a pass-through entity for a lot of local funds, but in order to secure not just direct funding, but to make these grant programs more manageable for you guys, that's something you can advocate for. It's something YDOT continues to advocate for. And I would say find opportunities that highlight the rural elements. A lot of programs now, and it seems like that is a theme that is continuing, which is good, have a certain percentage set aside for just rural entities. So I would definitely think of those opportunities that will be the most competitive for your projects, and really do talk to your legislators at the federal and state, because they hold the purse strings, and a sufficiently funded program floats all boats.
Being former Federal Highway Administration and my background is in the finance side, so when we talk about funding, there's never going to be enough funding to meet all of the priorities that everybody has. So, eventually there might be some funding, but there's never going to be enough funding to immediately resolve whatever your issues are. So I feel like if you are wanting to get funding, you almost have to plan ahead and think about and prioritize what is, your project and how it's going to fit and meet the objectives of the funding that you're trying to reach. So like if you're applying for DOT funding, prioritization, the number one priority, both at the DOT level, US level, and I know at YDOT is safety. So you have to think about safety. And then after you think about safety, now you can think about all those other things that help your community, whether it's economic development, freight, being able to, have your, have people be able to commute to your town or go to work there. So it's very important that you think about and prioritize your project and think about how it can fit into the federal, objectives, and that's going to help sell your project and probably get you funding better.
Well, maybe while we're on thinking about strategies to make your projects more competitive, to make them stand out, to have you all feeling like you're ready to move forward with those projects, but by show of hands, is anyone in here because you are trying to move a critical transportation project in your community forward?
Just raise your hand. Where's Harrison?
Mr. Harrison?
As a nonprofit, we're trying to move forward with senior and disabled transportation throughout Laramie County. So that's the basis, and the panel's pretty much where the experts are at getting me the information I need to move forward.
Well, if you are not here because you have a major transportation project, does anyone have a burning question for our transportation panelists today? Before we jump into some of our other questions, I thought with this being a fireside chat, we're a little far away from you, but if you all have questions, well, we have YDOT and DOT and all of these wonderful experts who've been working in transportation for a very long time. This is your moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Deshan Schinkel, Executive Director with the Wyoming Senior Olympics. I heard you say there are communities and airports asking for revitalization of their airports. My question is more so on the tourism aspect of why bringing, in our case, senior athletes to the state of Wyoming. Our goal, and when I say our goal, the board of directors and myself, and I am also on the board of directors at the national level, I would love to see Wyoming host a national senior games. We're looking at 14,000 athletes over a 2-week period coming into Wyoming. Just finished up our state games in Cheyenne this last weekend, and we had a 94-year-old gentleman out of Oregon fly into DIA, get a rental car, drive over to Cheyenne, participate in 6 events, get back into that rental car, back to DIA, and flew back home to Oregon because we didn't have that option for him into Wyoming, and cost effective as well. How are we looking at, and is there any potential future airlines coming back into the state, the Casper, the Cheyenne area, Gillette, here even in Gillette or Laramie? Is there anything in the works?
So we actually worked this issue through the last legislative session. So we do have air service in Wyoming, and we do have mechanisms and reporting, and I've actually had a conversation a couple of weeks ago that if you do the math from the trip and all the things according and doing the rental car or doing the storage in the vehicle, all the things associated with that, it's actually more cost effective to fly out of Cheyenne to Denver and get on your trip. So there is air service. In fact, the air service in Wyoming, there was an $18 million request, and it got funded. And what that does is it subsidizes the travel into Wyoming. That's pure and simple. There's a relationship on that funding with travel and tourism. Travel and tourism has funding that comes in every time that you have a hotel, meal and lodging, travel and tourism, and they supported that request so that we have that available. And that was in this last session. So there is an ongoing effort, and there is air service in Wyoming, and I believe that it is, if you actually crunch the numbers, it is cost effective. And then there's the other aspect of airports. There is funding for the rehabilitation of the airports themselves, the runways, et cetera. So that flows through the Department of Transportation as well, and it's not insignificant. And that helps us maintain all the travel on airports, not just the commercial air that we just discussed, but all the other travel that you might have. You might have somebody flying into Gillette today that came in on a ride. It might be a consultant from Hagerty. It might be all kinds of different people, but they did. I know for a fact that people flew into here in Rapid City and Casper and drove to this conference. So we do have an airport, and it is, it's not insignificant the amount of money that we commit to the entire state of Wyoming to keep providing those services.
This will be kind of an unsatisfying answer, but once again, that is with air service and transit and rail, a lot of that, it's not state-owned infrastructure. And so people are running a business off of it, or even if they're a nonprofit transit agency, as the state, we don't really have a lot of actual funding that we can put towards that. We don't own that infrastructure. We can help guide or work with industry to make those better. We do provide the pass-through funding, but that is something. Now is kind of the time with reauthorization to make that case if we feel like there is a lack of public transportation. Talk to your legislators. They're the ones who are writing the policy and appropriating the funding for these programs. And has just kind of a heads up on the House side of Congress. There's already a big push to go back to where IIJA was very kind of all infrastructure. This new focus is very much road and bridges, not so much public transit, aeronautics. So if you want more investments in those areas, do advocate, because the default mode is to go to kind of the bread and butter road and bridge. And I think more community input could change that, but unfortunately WYDOT is hamstrung to a certain point depending on what's available from the federal level or the state legislature, honestly.
one of the other things that I forgot to point out is, have you ever been at DIA and gone through security? How many hours? You line up in queue, you get all that. You go to air service in Wyoming, it's show up, get on, and go international flight. That's another great value for Wyoming, because we've seen all that is qualified for the airline flights. And that's a big deal for me. I know that.
On a similar note, are there other transportation investment areas that you think would have the greatest impact for Wyoming? So we had airports. Are there other areas where you see investments would really spur that growth?
I'm gonna jump in right now and just say safety. The loss of human lives on our roads is very high. And there's a lot of safety features, grants out there through NHTSA that can help prevent these. And so having some sort of plan, looking at the data that's available either through YDOT, mobile telematics data, NHTSA has lots of data for us to use. But following that data and implementing those safety features now and not waiting for another fatality to happen.
Could you please clarify NHTSA?
NHTSA, it's the National Highway Traffic Safety Association.
Did you all get that?
Hello, okay. I guess I'll just quickly add that freight can be very important. And I mentioned freight mainly because there is a grant program out right now. As a lot of my job comes from telling people about funding, I might be a little too focused on it. But some of you may remember a few years ago, our infra program was around, and then all the money was completed and awarded. There is now, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's about $600 million more dollars available, and it's very focused on freight as well as truck parking is a very big part of it. There's a lot of funding for that. So that's just something I want to bring up if you're thinking about freight.
I would add the caveat before anyone gets like super excited about that. They are also focusing on projects that are 150 million or more. I know you can do small project, but the focus is on 50-50 federal, state. So infra maybe this round, still look at it, but just warning, when I talk about leveraging and putting your efforts towards things that you will be competitive in, infra tends towards those larger projects. It does have the commercial motor vehicle parking side, a little more flexibility, but just things to keep in mind when you were looking through it. And if you ever do want to contact YDOT and discuss this, I have talked to communities about helping them out a little bit with, in the transportation realm, what may be worth going for based on rural set-asides that are available. Like I said, some of these programs reserve a certain amount of funding just for populations under 200,000. There's also some flexibility sometimes in the builds, Tiger Arrays, however they rebrand it. We'll let rural communities go up to 100% federal match. So those are definitely ones to keep in mind. But I also know now we have the great resource in the state grants group. So that has taken a lot of calls off my plate. So made my life easier, but I am still willing to talk about if you need help wrapping your head around those programs, feel free to reach out to YDOT or USDOT is a resource I use. So.
We will happily send more people your way. Something that we spent quite a bit of time on this week. Oh,
There's a question.
Go right ahead. Yes, please.
It's not related to that or specifically, but totally new topic. We've heard a lot about Wyoming being first in the nation carbon sequestration, Bitcoin legislation, nuclear. Where do you think autonomous vehicles and autonomous maybe public transportation, where do you see that for our state?
Slowly coming. Right now, there's no fully autonomous vehicle, truly fully autonomous out there. There's some sort of, there's research out there. There are some companies out in certain locations, but they can't use interstates. They only can use side roads, and they're really restricted. So we're a long ways from fully autonomous before it reaches truly being out on our roads and hauling nuclear waste or whatever across the state.
Any other questions? Apologies, my bag is to this side, so I'm sorry I didn't see that you had your hand raised. Okay, well, that was a wonderful question, thank you. The question I had for you all was building on one of the topics that we spent a lot of time on during the grant training portion of this year's summit, and that was around taking a look at the project that you have and figuring out if there are any aspects of that project that you're not currently focusing on, but if you could build on it, maybe there's funding for it. So the example was maybe you have some sort of a water infrastructure project, but there's a transportation element to it. Maybe you can build some transportation funding into it to try to get you started, get a shovel in the ground. And one of the questions that we always had, well, how can I make this transportation project competitive if I haven't been working toward building a competitive transportation project? I've always looked at it as a water project. You mentioned safety data. Maybe we spend a bit more time on that. Are there other data sources or other strategies that you would recommend that communities use if they're trying to make a transportation project or a component of a project that touches transportation competitive?
So first thing is going to be using data. Crash data is going to be a big piece of it. If anybody is wanting to know where to get crash data, you go to WYDOT's website. At the bottom it says contact us, and there's a lovely little drop-down menu that talks about crash information. So that is the quickest and easiest way to get that information. But that's just one piece. We also have access to mobile telematics. And so through that, we can tell within about 3 days what a traffic behavioral pattern is out there. So we can pinpoint in communities where hotspots are. And so we can start pre-identifying intersections where law enforcement may need to deploy to help reduce a risk. And so all that is available. It's just knowing who to ask and going there.
Are you sure? Because I've been talking too much. I would say to add on to that, something that I run into a lot when I'm writing grants is sometimes our data is limited or not there, or frankly, not as impressive as like when I talk to my counterparts in like Colorado. Their rural areas are huge compared to anywhere in Wyoming, right? And so a strategy that I've found some success in is still use that data, but put it in the right context. This makes me sound like a horrible individual, but a lot of times like our crash numbers aren't high enough to really get national attention, right? But if you can put it in the context of, a lot of times I do like population density in the area or in the state, it starts to paint a different picture, and you focus more, I guess, on that, not just the quantitative analysis, but the qualitative analysis of the benefit cost. And who knows kind of your communities and those infrastructure issues better than you. To your point, if it was like a water infrastructure project, but there's a transportation component, you might have more of a qualitative analysis rather than quantitative and a bunch of numbers. Do try to find some data or research or something to help support, but don't count yourself out necessarily if you do feel like there's a strong logical argument being made and you could hit those merit criteria. That is something I've done in the past, put the project in as much context as possible to show that this project is needed, so.
Yeah, very good. I 100% agree with data. I think funders, when you're applying for a grant, data is what helps sell your project. It helps tell the funders and other people what you actually want to do and what you want to accomplish and why it's important. But in addition to data, I think it's really important to also think about, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, is planning. So a lot of times we think about, hey, let's go out and look for grants and see what kind of grants we can qualify for, when maybe, and this is a good example, when you have like a sewer project that's maybe could also have a transportation component. When you do the big plan and you think about your plan, you can actually identify all of those components and really build a good application package and apply for multiple types of funding to help support that. And then in addition to planning, I think partnerships is another really good thing, because usually transportation projects benefit more than just one group. So, in your community, if you can find other folks, other partners, other collaborators, people that can help support your project, that is also going to be 100% helpful to you. The big one, which sometimes we don't think about, but that's what this whole grants management, funding summit's all about, for people to learn things, is organizational capacity. So you're out in a small community, there might just be one of you there, and you're wanting to apply for grants. Having that organizational capacity, understanding what the requirements are, knowing that you can reach out to the grants management office and get assistance, you can reach out to YDOT and get assistance. That is really an important thing too. So think about that. Make sure that your staff understands, what the requirements are, because that's going to make your grant a lot more successful. And honestly, the funders are also going to look and see, hey, are you going to be able to deliver this project? And if you can show them, yes, we have the organizational capacity, we have the knowledge to do it, you're going to have a lot better success with funders and getting funded.
So I should have tried to jump in before he did, because he took the rest of mine. But so I guess I'll just reiterate, for specifically local government coordination, data has been big this year. Really looking at the numbers to see what we need to try to serve as for the public, for the state of Wyoming. So data is very important. The big part I wanted to plug for the state budget office or the grant management office is really that technical capacity piece. We find in the transit world, as well as even the TAP, the local program side, some of these entities don't necessarily have the technical capacity to be able to run the grant, which then there's my plug again for coordination. Work with your partners, work with the successful partners in the state that have successfully completed these projects or are running big programs, and kind of see where they started and what kind of tools can they give you that's going to make your day-to-day easy. So, but that's the plug for the grant management office, is reach out to them to get that technical capacity, because if they can help you learn through that, then you're going to be more than capable to handle what you need to.
One of the capacity areas that we often help with, we'll get requests that say, I just don't have the data. And maybe now they'll be able to track that down. And I'll share something that popped up in my community, and then I'll have a question for you. So I live in a large city, and we have a lot of kind of rail to trails going through the city. But it was really hard to justify that folks are flying through those intersections. There are just probably too many streets in the city for them to be able to track just how much we're impacted by speeding. And one of the neighborhoods along one, essentially, and someone 24/7 on this one road is sitting in a little lawn chair with a speed gun, watching drivers as they speed over. There's a speed bump there already, but as they speed over this trail where we have cyclists and families and everyone is coming across this trail, just so that we have some data to say there is a real need to create a bridge or something to protect the folks who are using these trails in our cities. Have you all seen, because we know that there are some data needs here, have you all seen any creative strategies either in collecting data or in the way that folks tell their story with their data, with the data that they have?
I guess kind of going off of what was mentioned earlier about putting your story, your data into context, I want to just add to that because for the federal government, when we look at grant applications, we're looking very holistically. And so the people who review your applications probably do not know what your small town in Wyoming has the data. They don't know. And that's kind of done on purpose, of course. But a lot of feedback I get and give when I do debriefs for unsuccessful applicants is that they didn't maybe put something in the right context. They had the story, they had the data, but they didn't understand, that those reviewers don't know anything about your town. And so, what the reviewers don't know could hurt you. And so understanding that aspect, I think, is really important.
I think the biggest thing that we have going right now is the use of telematics data. Insurance companies now have been offering safe driving discounts. When you put a little thing in your vehicle, you're sharing that information. And insurance companies have been using telematics data to set our rates for years. But now we're just now getting to the point where we can start using it on the safety side. So using that telematics data, like I mentioned, I can tell what happens in the community right now, what happened 3 days ago. And so with enough data points, you can start implementing those strategies to put high visibility enforcement in those corridors, and getting law enforcement there to help put up radar signs. There's a whole lot of countermeasures out there that specifically focus on speed reduction. And so, but collecting that data, first one, newest one available, 2 years didn't exist, for at least for the safety side of analytics. Now that we're using that, we can deploy law enforcement, start looking at our dangerous intersections so we can get it to our traffic engineers to see if it is an infrastructure issue or if it's capacity issue, speed issue, whatever it is, we can actually start seeing that now.
We have also seen in some grant applications that have come through our office for transportation programs that when there isn't a lot of data, but they do have stories to tell or they have impact statements, sometimes it's helpful if you're allowed to just add a map. This is the highway that runs through our community, and anyone who wants to get from the school to the community center has to walk on our highway. You can see that in the map here. And I told you about it in this paragraph, but this visual is so impactful for you to see, oh, all of the kids after school are walking down this highway to our community center. That tells your story. We've also seen really high impact graphs and bar charts. You all are doing really great work in your application. So thank you for sharing some strategies that you have seen. The other question that I kept getting yesterday, and I didn't really have a good answer, so I'm hoping that you all do. What does innovative mean to you? When we see that DOT or YDOT, that you all are looking for innovative projects, what does this mean? I would like to have an answer for next year's summit.
All right, well, I'll do my best. And it kind of goes to, I think, what I've said like 2 times now, but to put it in context. And so when I debrief rural communities and they're asking me that same question, like, what the heck do you mean by innovative? What does that mean? And what it means is it new to your community? So there might not be a roundabout in 60 miles, and while to a regular, maybe YDOT or DOT employee, a roundabout is not very innovative by itself. But if you can, in a sentence or two, just say, there isn't one in 60 miles, put a map on there showing where they are, within the few counties near you, that is innovative. The point is being able to describe what is innovative to you and your community.
So earlier Bob shared with you the importance of grading or stacking grants. You want to look out there for partners that have the same interests with you to solve a problem. Innovation would be wildlife crossings. So we had a relationship with the Game and Fish, Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund, and the national government, FHWA, and WYDOT. That was innovative, and you can see those wildlife crossings and how innovative they are. So that would be an example that I would use. And by the way, I just want to kind of follow up on tourism and how you would approach the Senior Citizen Center. The incubation area of that would be travel and tourism. They have a great relationship with WYDOT, and you could reach out there and they could start helping you with the idea of how we could get that and what the benefits for Wyoming to have in the Senior Olympics.
This might be a tricky question. We'll see. And maybe you all have the answers, actually. With all of these projects that you have reviewed and looked at for the many years that you have been in this work, are there any just fascinating collaborations that stand out to you where you were surprised that these 2 or 3 organizations came together for this transportation project, but it just worked? And you'd like to see maybe other communities see if that's something that could work for them.
I don't know if I was surprised that they got together, but we've started having, during COVID, there was we always heard there was a shortage of staff, particularly in law enforcement. And so part of that, we worked with the Lander chief at the time and created a multi-jurisdictional enforcement effort. And it pulled all the law enforcement agencies in Fremont County together to focus on specific areas. So during that time, we went from seeing like 12 fatalities in Fremont counties to 5. So that was a pretty significant drop. We've also implemented that now involving law enforcement agencies in Laramie County, Albany County, and then we're starting one in Natrona County as well. So it's something that we knew needed to happen. People are short on resources, particularly law enforcement right now. And so it's a way to keep the safety aspect and on the forefront, and a great effort by those agencies who are already kind of collaborating in some effort, but they got funding to do it.
So the one I'll go back to is, so I've only actually been in my position a little over about 9 months or so as the supervisor of the office. But in the transit program, we actually fund 37 providers throughout all 23 counties of the state. And Tim in Fremont County at WRTA, another Fremont County collaboration, he's really focused on figuring out how to collaborate and regionalize. So over this last year, he was the first transit provider to actually look at the data, look at the numbers, look at, I guess, the distance, the mileage, the routes, and he actually combined with Riverton Senior Center. So we no longer fund Riverton Senior Center, and he is picking up and coordinating all of those rides. So I don't know exactly what his model looks like. I'm assuming they leave a vehicle at the senior center, but then he's able to dispatch and still get all of those Riverton rides on top for the senior center on top of the WRTA route. And he is very focused on trying to work with the other communities around there. It just takes time, but I would highly encourage regionalization where you can in the transit world.
With some of the grant applications maybe that come through your office, have you seen more regionalized projects, or are you seeing individual communities submitting projects where they're still competitive, but perhaps there could have been more support if they had gone in it together?
For USDOT, I would say we're seeing a lot of regionalization. Also, one of the focuses of for at least my teams and my offices for the reauthorization, one thing that we put forward were RPOs, whether that is regional planning organizations or rural planning organizations, whichever, but kind of like a parallel to the MPOs, the metro planning organizations, where they're more focused on smaller areas. So it is something, I don't know where that landed, of course. Hopefully it goes somewhere, but that is something that DOT is mindful of, and we see a lot.
Well, and I'll open it again too to see if you all have any more burning questions for us. Want to make sure we leave enough time for Q&A. Yes. Oh, we'll bring the microphone. Thank you.
I'm a member, I live in Campbell County, and I know we have the senior center that is a public transit place for, basically it's for seniors and disabled people. It's not widely known that it's for any other people, but it's mainly for them. How do we get a transit system that will span the area on a regular basis, like in Utah or somewhere where you have public transit, where you can go from place to place to place and pick up people? Is that a feasible thing in Wyoming? Is that why we don't have it? Because we really need it to connect the library and the museum and other places that are tourist areas for people that may not want to be driving all over the place that don't know.
I mean, I believe that in the future it might be feasible. That's one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with when I go to national conferences and I'm able to network with all these other states. I love it because I can see I can see the vast differences. Obviously they have significantly more funding, more staffing, more population than we do. So then to try to bring it back to Wyoming and see how we can take certain things that work well in other states and how can we kind of manipulate that just enough to see how we can bring it here. I do think that the biggest start to that is going to be just simply start the conversations, public outreach, and collaboration. As I believe I talked to you a little bit earlier, but reach out to Ann in Campbell County and see kind of where that conversation starts. Because back to from a DOT oversight perspective, it would be a lot easier for me to deal with 23 subrecipients, one in every county, than the 37 subrecipients I have. I mean, the need is there. The public rides need to happen, but how can we have some of our bigger centers, I guess, take on the workload of the smaller outlying centers in order to still provide those rides? So how can we collaborate to regionalize? I just think it's going to take time, unfortunately, and that's not a great answer. But I do see that the more we get the public to actually talk about it and the need of those rides, something that's sparking a lot of that conversation right now is and I can't speak for them a whole lot, but the Department of Health and them getting that rural, health transformation funds. They're still trying to develop that program. I can't speak for it. We don't know what it looks like. We just know it's a significant amount of money. And they're trying to figure out how to develop that to fund that to the state. I've been waiting to be able to collaborate with them, especially on the non-emergency medical transport. That's one of the biggest ones that Wyoming cares about right now, is that non-emergency medical transport. So it's just unfortunately going to take a little bit of time. But the biggest thing I can say is make sure you collaborate with your partners, know who's out there. Like you said, it's not widely known that the senior centers in Wyoming, if they're funded with our funds, they have to provide public transit to anybody. You don't have to be a senior. You can call them and say, hey, I need a doctor's appointment. Can you come pick me up at this address and take me to my appointment? It's just a matter of following their policies. I mean, if it has to be scheduled, it has to be scheduled. But even when I started this program, I didn't realize that the senior centers in Wyoming that received state funds had to provide public rides to everybody. So I don't know how we can campaign that or communicate that better, but we will definitely work at trying to get our subrecipients to communicate that better.
Well, I believe you mentioned a gentleman named Tim with the Wind River Transportation Program, but it is an interesting model. Did you say that that's the only place where we see that sort of a transportation program here?
Yes, so far, that's the only one I've seen so far with me just coming into the program. Tim Nichols. So his name is Tim Nichols. He is the director of the Wind River Transit Authority in Fremont County. He's very big about planning. So as they kept talking about planning, that's a huge aspect to you and your funding and your innovation, your everything. You've got to look at the plans. But he's a big proponent of planning, and he was looking at just some of the services, not necessarily saying they're duplicate services, but if I'm funding the Riverton Senior Center and I'm funding him, and some of those rides are overlapping, is it something that could be coordinated better and scheduled better? So that's where he kind of started his thought. As I've mentioned, he's already taken on the Riverton Senior Center. I don't know where they're sitting with the other subrecipients within Fremont County to get that collaboration started. I know he's trying to have those conversations, but I don't know where they're going. So I would recommend all of you go to the transportation or the transit funded subrecipient in your county. If that's something you desire, start the conversation with them and bring YDOT into it, and we're happy to visit with them. Because if those rides are not met, like, we need to know what need is not being filled.
I'll just add on to what Tim's been able to do in Fremont County. They operate a Silver Ride Home type program there. All they did was, I believe they're using some federal funds from the local government side and some NHTSA funds. NHTSA funds just was the informational side. And so I believe when the program first started, we were getting 2 to 3 rides a weekend. Now I believe they're over the last year, they jumped almost 1,000% on the rides. So just with a little bit of effort, getting the information out, educating your public is what's going to drive that information. And so how you get it out, it depends. Do you put it at the bars if that's how you're getting where your audience is, or do you put it at the library, wherever your people are at? That's where you got to get that information.
And then I'll just add one more thing to that. As many of you know, if you've done grants, like, the reporting piece of it is a very important aspect as well. So I know that in transit, we have to report to the NTD, which is through the FTA. The data that we report to that is very important because the funds that they give to the state of Wyoming, it all comes through a formula. So the information that we report at the end of the year, it needs to be accurate. Which then falls back to the technical capacity. Do we have the software that we're tracking things properly? Are we reporting the rides properly? Does the FTA or the DOT, the US DOT, do they really understand the number of rides that we're providing and the importance of the rural rides that we do provide? If somebody's on a fixed route and you get a bunch of people on a bus and you're going a certain distance, those rides tend to be a little cheaper. When you're looking at these small rural communities, it's a significant cost to be able to take one of your citizens from a specific town to the closest town that has a hospital. That ride might cost you $82 by the time you were able to take them in and out of a community. So some rides you can get as cheap as probably about $2 to $3 a rider, but some are going to be $80 or $100 per ride just to make one medical transport. So ridership data is important. Cost is important, things like that.
Well, I had an AI question, but you also kind of had an AI question. So I'll still ask it and see where this goes. And if you aren't comfortable, this isn't the AI session. So if you say, Rachel, go ask it in that room over there. They're doing AI right now.
Go ask me.
It doesn't have to be AI, but I am curious, how is, if it is, technology changing the way we're planning, building, and maintaining the transportation infrastructure here in Wyoming?
Everybody's looking at me for some
The
reason.
data guy,
Yeah, using AI to do analytics on your data. Yeah, that's been there. We've been using AI for years. Anybody that uses a calculator is using AI. So it's not a new thing. That the capacity to use it is significant now. As far as the infrastructure goes, going back to like autonomous vehicles, there's requirements for reflectiveness of signs, what's going to be on them. In Wyoming, I don't know, I'm pretty sure everybody's driven a Wyoming road after a snowstorm, you can't see the signs, they're covered in snow. The lane lines have to be a certain reflector and a certain width. So there is a lot of update to Wyoming's infrastructure, painting, signage, and everything that needs to happen before like autonomous vehicles or certain AI gets here.
It's not AI, but one thing that YDOT has made a concerted effort towards is more intelligent transportation system. Things like variable speed limits, those dynamic message signs. We recently implemented a blowover closure based on studies with UW on closing the roads to certain gross vehicle weights to help mitigate that issue. So we are using technology, even if it's not necessarily AI, but as that stuff, as those technologies advance, we've kind of been right there with it, and that does seem to be a lot of appetite, even in this new reauthorization going forward. So we look to meet the moment there as well.
I'm not sure if it's happening here in Wyoming, but one of the things that I've heard about is that I think is pretty cool because I'm interested in them, is unmanned aerial vehicles or drones. And I know a lot of state DOTs are using drones for like inspections, like bridge inspections. It's a lot safer to have a drone go up and, be able to video in high def versus having somebody hanging off the bridge, dangerously trying to take pictures. So I feel like technology is really advancing a lot, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, we have a UAS program in our aeronautics, and we also, our photogrammetry and surveys group has done a lot of cool things using LiDAR. Though that group normally does surveys for projects, it's actually helped in a lot of disaster mitigation for like the Big Phil slide, for any rock falls, landslides, being able to use that LiDAR technology to get a better 3D point map and scan of the area has really helped with our emergency response around the state.
That's fascinating. I would love to see those images. Well, we have a question. Oh, okay, thank you.
Personal note, electric cars in the state of Wyoming, and I know it's more so commercial, and I'll speak for Cheyenne area. They have the stations in Cheyenne, but is there education and funding for education to be around the state in educating our Wyoming residents, but also those who come traveling through the state of Wyoming, of how those cars are handled on our windy highways, our long distances between cities and those stations? Is there anything out there funding for commercial entities out there to educate?
It's kind of wrapped up in that, but there was the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, the NEVI program, that we did work on a plan, including a communication plan. We have it on our web page on YDOT, has its own area where you can get kind of information on it. Not necessarily EVs, but it's kind of like a pass-through program where we can work with private entities to place in charging. We've really just planned. We haven't had really any bites with it. A lot of those stations that you see like on Target, like Electrify America, they already had those installed. That's private sector. And so we did have a communication plan, but it was more on how we would set up the RFPs to do NEVI stations with the private sector, not so much public facing besides kind of what's on our website, which we do have some things about range and where we would need to locate the stations to help alleviate range anxiety. I'm sure you've all heard of. That being said, it's probably not going to get as much funding or focus in this next reauthorization, because again, they're going back to very bread and butter roads and bridges. It's kind of been left up to industry, to be honest. I mean, we do have a communication plan, but we have such a small percentage, I forget what it is, but some single digit percentage of EV drivers in the state. So we have not invested a lot in doing communication as far as driving through Wyoming. It also changed a little bit. Sorry, you hit an area I'm very nerdy about. But now that a lot of vehicle companies have adopted the same ports as the Tesla chargers used, that has helped kind of alleviate a lot of those issues automatically, because Tesla, when they went through, spaced them extremely well. So car makers are kind of dealing with those issues as the technology gets better. A lot of those anxieties or things that we were worried about when we started the NEVI program are kind of sorting themselves out. So we're really kind of leaving it to industry to do those communications.
Thank you for your question. I believe we are, based on the applause I can hear, we are at about time. Do you all have any final remarks before we close out our panel today? Data. Collaboration. Well, thank you all. There will be booths around today if you have more questions for our panelists. We also do have a resource guide at our registration table if you're interested in learning a bit more about the folks who are on our panel today and the resources that they have available to you. So please go and pick one up at some point today. Thank you.